Hello everyone. It starts with a seed, adapting agriculture to climate change. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this important launchpad. Thank you for joining us at the Global Landscapes Forum. I'm Stefan Schmitz, Executive Director of the Crop Trust. I'm thrilled to be sharing the launch of our new project, Biodiversity for Opportunities, Livelihoods and Development, or BOLD for short. Climate change is a tremendous threat to our livelihoods, health and well-being. It's critical we change our agriculture to face these new challenges. We need to act now, and we need to act boldly to ensure a food-secure future for our children and grandchildren. At the Crop Trust, we are committed to working with our partners to finding solutions that harness the infinite potential of crop diversity. In a moment, we'll hear from the new Norwegian Minister of Development, Anne-Beate Tvinnereim. And following that, we'll hear an exciting panel discussion that deep dives into our new project, followed by a final lightning talk all the way from Spitsbergen, home of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, by Norwegian Gene Bank Coordinator Asmund Asdal. I wish you a productive and interesting conference. Be well, be bold.
Bringing you up to date on the coronavirus pandemic.
This is like a flu on steroids.
We all need some good news, and at times it is hard to find as COVID-19 continues to spread.
Dear friends, at this crossroads of our being, I'm pleased to welcome you to this session on adapting agriculture to climate change here at the Global Landscapes Forum. The clock is ticking. People are starving and the planet is melting. So the topic you have chosen for today is not only catching the two gravest challenges of our time, it's also holding the keys to solving them. The key, in this case, being seeds. Food security and climate change are deeply intertwined. For millions of small-scale farmers around the world, especially in Southern Africa, climate change already changes the world. They are having their harvests being washed away, and they are forced to leaving their homes. Being a farmer's daughter, I know that seeds may not look like much, but seeds have changed the course of history before. Within them, lies the foundation of the future of food and of feeding the hungry. However, seeds are under threat. Weather is changing and food systems are breaking down. Particularly for small-scale farmers, a nutrition-secure future is slipping out of reach. They are in need of bold action. And that is why Norway, together with the Crop Trust, have launched the BOLD project. Biodiversity for opportunities, livelihoods and development. The aim is to provide small-scale farmers with seeds that can withstand more rain, more drought, more heat. The project builds on lessons learned from the Crop Wild Relatives project, a successful initiative on adapting agriculture to climate crisis. Adaptation means safeguarding crop diversity in seed banks, supporting pre-breeders and ensuring that climate-resistant varieties reach the farmers. When facing tremendous tasks, we can freeze, or we can flee, or we can fight. We choose to fight. And once again, it all starts with seeds. We will not meet the challenges of our time, from combating climate change to ending extreme poverty, without the contribution of 500 million small-scale farmers around the world. In the war against poverty and climate change, we could know better than enlisting this potentially powerful army of willing hands. So with a new BOLD project, resulting in more resilient seeds, they will turn good words into good deeds. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to It Starts with a Seed, Adapting Agriculture to Climate Change. I am Nora Castañeda Alvarez, Project Manager of Seeds for Resilience, a crop trust project strengthening national gene banks in Africa. Seeds are a lot more important than you think. As a scientist involved in Seeds for Resilience, I see them as Lego pieces, the building blocks of our future food and nutrition security. Biodiversity for Opportunities, Livelihoods and Development, or BOLD for short, is a groundbreaking new 10-year project fully funded by the government of Norway at $58 million. Its goal is to conserve and use seeds in gene banks to develop new crop varieties that can withstand threats from the climate emergency. BOLD is an example of a long-term project that treats all stakeholders as equal actors to combat the effects of climate change on agriculture and ensure food security in lower-income countries. And I'm very excited to be moderating this panel today because we will be launching a unique new initiative as part of the BOLD project to support gene banks at great risk, but more on that later. It is my delight to introduce you to some of the key people involved in the birth of this project, who work for organizations that are instrumental in building a food-secure future for our children and grandchildren. Please meet Daniel van Gilst, a senior agricultural advisor for the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, or NORAD for short. Daniel has been working as agricultural advisor over the last 20 years at NORAD. He was engaged with the establishment of the Plant Treaty for NORAD in 2004, as well as the establishment of the Crop Trust in 2006, and has been involved with the Crop Wild Relatives project since its inception all the way to today, where we celebrate the launch of BOLD. Daniel also represents Norway at the System Council in the CGIAR and the Crop Trust in its donor council. Kent Nadosi, Secretary of the International Treaty of Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, also known as the Plant Treaty. The Plant Treaty is an essential partner in BOLD. Over the last decade, Kent has worked on legal and policy matters and intergovernmental processes with both the Plant Treaty and FAO's Commission for Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. Eliane Ubaliyoro, the Executive Director of Sustainability in the Digital Age and the Global Hub Director in Canada for Future Health, Earth, as well as a Professor of Practice for Public-Private Sector Partnerships at McGill University's Institute for the Study of International Development, and a member of the Global Crop Diversity Trust Executive Board. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Often when we talk about gene banks, I think it's not always so clear why they have such an important role in ensuring food security. Eliane, you appreciate and value the work of gene banks from both a professional and a personal perspective. You have seen how gene banks have helped rebuild your country's agriculture. Can you tell us about this experience?
Yes, so I come from Rwanda, and when the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis happened, all the crops were left in the fields. And so what happened is after the genocide, it was critical to rebuild the local gene banks and have seeds for farmers to plant. And so if it hadn't been from the availability of gene banks around the world that held stocks of crops that are grown in Rwanda, it would have been very difficult for Rwandans to restart agriculture. And so I, as somebody who's been working in the field and who studied in agriculture at the time of the genocide, I really feel that I understand what it's like in terms of the critical importance of gene banks for countries that go through disasters, countries that go through conflict, and the importance of how do we preserve gene banks, the seeds of the planet, to ensure that no matter what happens, we're able to restart. And this is why I think it's so critical that the work that national gene banks, as well as the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, is critical to ensure that we always have backup systems to ensure that we can continually feed the humanity.
Thanks, Eliane. That's a remarkable story. And I think in many cases, we always see it with the breeders they use, but also in these times of crisis, it's important also to acknowledge this type of cases where the gene banks have proved to be useful. Thanks. Daniel, I mentioned the Crop World Relatives Project, a 10-year project that the government of Norway has funded from 2011 until now, and how BOLD is in many ways an extension and a continuation of it. As an instrumental figure in making this project possible, could you tell us a bit about, from your perspective, why BOLD is important in the face of this global crisis?
Thank you very much to be invited for this meeting. And yeah, I mean, actually the Crop World Relatives and the BOLD, both they're sort of a continuation of each other, and they sort of feed very nicely into each other. One could say that BOLD is an extension of Crop World Relatives, focusing on a number of other areas. I mean, we are maintaining and strengthening the collecting and the pre-breeding and the conservation efforts of the program, and we're including also more training into the new BOLD. But you know, as I see it, there's 70 to 80% of the farmers are using informal seed systems, and they're not only using the formal seed systems, as you know, just a small minority. So many farmers, they have this farm seed system, which is the local market, which is the exchanging between farmers, which is, and almost 80% of many countries in Africa are actually using this informal, as we call it in many cases, or the farmer seed system. And that group of farmers are really not being reached in many cases as far as research is concerned. They're not being helped to the extent they could be. And this is what we thought was actually missing in the Crop World Relatives project, that element. And I think this new project here, the BOLD, will sort of build on the experiences it's had so far and extend it to more closer to the farmers, hopefully. So that's sort of the aim and maybe the new thing of this new project here, where we take the step towards the farmer better and stronger, and hoping that link will improve. And I think there's a lot to be done in actually this particular sector, working closer with the small scale farmers, which in the end represent about 70 to 80% of all the farmers in Africa, at least. So it's I think it's a good step also towards climate, solving a climate issue here. Back to you.
Thank you, Daniel. That's indeed very interesting, and we're also looking forward on how our work can cascade down to other type of users too, like farmers, as you've mentioned. Daniel, again, I have another question for you.
Okay.
What's Norway's interest in bulk? Why was it so important for your government to support this international project?
Yeah, it starts with the seed is the name of this presentation, and in one way it also started very small in our way of getting into the seed sector. I think it began long before my time, and already in the 80s and 90s, and it started small. I mean, with supporting to the work for the treaty all through the 90s, and eventually we got the treaty, and and then Norway sort of started building on this together with the whole collective of the treaty, and we started having financial mechanisms in place. The crop trust was started, the benefit sharing fund was established, and so on, and then eventually we got different programs come in the whole picture, and what it really, and then we started the crop world and now the bold. But what it really comes down to, and what I see as one denominator, which really plays a key part for us, and which plays a major part into the solutions of future food issues, and challenges, and that main sort of denominator, which is the main thing here, is actually biodiversity. I mean, and that I think is the whole key of this one seed, and collecting the different seed and making this seed available for farmers and people, basically, and I think that has sort of got the imaginations of our politicians and of our own people here, and then sort of has supported this work actually since the 80s, as far as I can remember back. So it's been a long time going, and I'm sure and I hope this will continue, and it seems that we will continue now with Bold for another 10 years.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Daniel. It's interesting to know how, like, now that you make it clear, all this engagement from Norway and all the commitment through the time on seeds, on agriculture, and also this part of conserving and using biodiversity sustainably. Thanks for that. Eliane, from a crop trust perspective, how do you see gene banks' role in the global stage as we face climate change?
It's more and more critical that as we adapt and mitigate, we know that the changing conditions will create new pests, will amplify certain pests, will change growing conditions, and we need more and more the genetic diversity that's available in gene banks around the world to help us face these new crises that we face. And so I really see this as even more critical, especially as I think in Africa, given that by 2050, we know that population will double. So not only do we need to feed everybody who's here now, but we need to double the amount of food. So we need to increase crop productivity. We need to create greater resilience to droughts, to floodings. We need to be able to create more resilience to new viruses that may come up and emerge, fungi, other pests. And so having these gene banks is really important to safeguarding the food security of future generations. So I see this as extremely critical to our resilience and to ensuring that future generations have access to the biodiversity needed to ensure that we have crops that are bred to face upcoming conditions.
Thanks, Eliane. Now I have a question for Kent. And in my introduction, I mentioned that we are launching a unique initiative as part of Bold today. You know better than I do that gene banks are not indestructible. Natural disasters, political crises, pests and diseases outbreaks, equipment failure, or more recently, hardships related to the global pandemic can throw them into emergency situations. How can we make sure gene bank collections are safely conserved?
Thank you so much, Nora, and thanks to the Crop Trust for organizing this event. Before I answer directly your question, I also want to thank the government of Norway for this support that they are providing to this initiative, because it's not easy in these days to have a donor that is going to commit to the long term, essentially over 20 years on a particular issue. They've been very consistent and very committed to this And the treaty on its own helps provide the international legal framework that facilitates the work that both the Crop Trust is doing and also Secretariat, but also enables Norway to target certain activities that are related to the conservation and sustainable use of genetic resources, which are the main objectives of the treaty. And in the treaty system, gene banks, the global gene banks, not just, including the international global gene bank from the Svalbard seed vault to the international collections to the local community seed banks, form a global system of conservation that the treaty provides a legal framework for, and they provide an very important instrument and facility for food security. Sometimes we tend to neglect the role that gene banks play because they are really, really upstream and are not immediately visible. But they are, I would say, the spring from which the river of food flows from, because it's there that we're able to get what we need to cultivate, to breed, and to develop new varieties. But then gene banks, whether big or small, they're working hard to fulfill their missions, but sometimes external forces out of their control put them at risk. And even the best laid plans can fail. We have seen that experiences, whether it is with the outbreak of the global pandemic or natural disasters. And the thing that the gene banking crisis can result in the permanent loss of crop diversity, making it even harder to develop new crops that can respond to the changing climate, meet future needs, and also help feed the growing world population. And some of these forces that threaten the collections, because they include natural disasters, as I said, in some cases, civil strife, as Eliane's personal experience has shown us, and in some cases, equipment failure. So we have had to deal with real life instances of each of these situations. We've had requests for immediate and emergency support. And in the past, both the Crop Trust and the treaty have supported some gene banks in these kind of situations, an urgent need. But the reality is that until now, there hasn't been a structured, predictable, and consistent way to respond to this crisis. And I say until now because now we do. The Plant Treaty and the Crop Trust have joined forces to establish an emergency reserve for gene banks. And this reserve is thanks to the contribution of the government of Norway and some contribution also of government of Italy to make it possible and provide a funding mechanism that can respond rapidly when there's an immediate threat to unique crop diversity collections that fall under the treaty framework. So what this emergency reserve does is to provide rapid short-term and urgent support to unique collections in low and middle income countries when there is an immediate threat to the collections and there is no alternative financial support. And some of these needs include, as I said before, repair of equipment, procure supplies, evacuate collections, because at an instant where there's a civil war in a particular country, all they needed was $5,000 to be able to evacuate their collection to the neighboring country. They were desperate. So they had to call on us, who had to scramble to do so. Equipment failure, we had a similar instance of that, where their transformers that power their cold rooms broke down. And there was no, because of the government procurement procedures and bureaucracy, it would have taken weeks to be able to raise the fund to do that. They called on us to support in that kind of situation. Or even helps duplicate some of those material that are under threat and intervene in other ways, according to the situation. Sometimes it also requires deploying appropriate expertise to make an assessment of the situation, to know the extent of damage and to know what kind of intervention that will be required. So that is what this reserve does. So in essence, it provides a short-term bridging intervention and a buffer to secure collections in order to provide the room and the ability and the time to design a longer-term solution before irreparable damage or loss is caused to any collection. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Connected to that, what impact do you see this emergency fund that will have for the gene banks that are at most risk?
Yeah, what it does is that, of course, it provides them an assurance that, once there is an emergency situation where either because of bureaucratic requirements or not immediate access to the funds or lack of expertise, that they can have a buffer that they can call on immediately to help mitigate the damage and prevent permanent loss. So that's the key impact of this emergency result. While the Crop Trust already has a system in place where it provides long-term funding to keep the ongoing basis, even in some cases in a permanent and a perpetual situation like the Svalbard seed vault, there are no resources that arrange or that address that immediate sudden, where there's a natural disaster, hurricane, or the follow-up flooding, or civil war that happens in so many cases. This is what this does in that kind of situation. That's the impact we hope, and we expect that it's going to. And this is based on lived experience, not that it's theoretical in any way.
Thank you, Kent. So I think many gene banks will be very happy to know that this emergency fund is made available, and we'll see how this develops with BOLD. Daniel, BOLD and the Crop World Relatives project underpin the importance of making sure plant genetic resources are safe and available, and the role in adapting agriculture to climate change. What I also find interesting about the two projects is their length. Decade-long projects are rare. Why dive into a complex multi-year, multi-element project when nobody else does?
Yeah, I think development basically takes time. Is the way. Not on all projects we do, but I mean, in this particular project, they've been able to recognize that development takes time. I mean, just think about the Crop World Relatives project, where we had, we went through a 2-year period where we needed to do studies, basically what is out there, what is not in the gene banks, what do we need to collect, and where do we need to collect it. So that was sort of the first big step we did. That took 2 years alone, just to find out where we're going to collect and what collections are interesting for us to save and to save in perpetuity in a way. That was sort of the first part of the Crop World Relatives project. After that, once we collected, you needed to identify, needed to analyze the different seeds. You needed to store them, and you needed to see, okay, when does this grow? How fast does it grow? And so you have to know all this stuff as well. And you have to make agreements with countries where this is collected. You have to do training with different countries, where the countries themselves are also aware and want to keep them themselves. So it's not that all countries agreed with us. There's some countries who didn't want to agree, didn't want to have agreements with us. So then we didn't go there in that particular countries. There, in those countries where there was agreement and the country was interested in collecting their own material and putting it in their gene banks, we assisted. And we assisted in training of gene banks and so on and so forth. And then the next step is then, of course, the research on the crops itself, So you have this whole chain of events which you need to do to make a live seed, to make it all of a sudden, or a wild seed, to make it usable for a new seed system within a seed system. And then the next step would be then, how do we get that down to the breeder and to the farmer and that type of stuff. So that whole process alone takes a long time, and luckily we were able to convince our politicians, and it's not easy always to get support, but in this particular case they could see the long lines, and I'm really happy that they did, and they, and the same thing for BOLD. And I mean, now with BOLD, again, also a 10-year project where it's a combination of looking at gene banks, seeing how to support them, how to strengthen them, together with the national system, together with the national resources which are on board. And then you have to do it in cooperation. Without cooperation, without national ownership, you may as well forget it. So, that also takes time to get understanding, to get a will, and to get a motivation also nationally to do something. So all that particular issues all take time, and I think everybody recognizes that in Norway, but also I'm happy that the Crop Trust and all the partners involved with the Crop Trust are also yeah, they were pushing that sort of lengthy program. You know, Daniel, push this. We need a long breath here to get to our goals. And yeah, I'm happy they pushed, and happy we were able to support in this way. Back to you.
Thank you, Daniel. That's fantastic. And yeah, we depend a lot also with growing seasons and other stuff that sometimes makes our work a little longer.
It does. It does take time, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does. Eliane, recently you joined the Crop Trust Executive Board. Why and what is exciting to you about the work of the Crop Trust in Bold?
I'm excited for many, many reasons. I have to say that I was deeply honored to join the board because Wangari Maathai was on the board. And as an African woman, being in this space, knowing that she used to hold space here is a deep honor. And BOLD, I love this acronym. If you think about it, biodiversity, opportunity, livelihoods, and development. It's really about engaging in building trust so that we can collectively, through technical as well as equitable cooperation, work collectively together, from smallholder farmers to researchers to policymakers, in terms of how do we ensure that we have the biological diversity to ensure that the crops of the future will allow feeding humanity. So for me, it's a real honor to be able to do this work. This work is important. It's work that has to be done across the planet. So the projects are ambitious, they're critical, and it's important that they are lengthy. In terms of 10 years, it's important because we really need to make sure we have long-term viability for these stocks. And the name Crop Trust, it's about how do we create trust in how we are going to feed the world in the future. So it's not only about preserving the seeds of the future, but it's also about how do we live our interdependence as humanity to ensure that we leave nobody behind as we prepare to adapt and become more resilient, to ensure that as climate change is upon us, that we really ensure that we can create conditions for all humanity to thrive, and that this biological diversity that we have in our crops will really give us the possibilities for researchers, for smallholder farmers, collectively within all of the variety of seeds that are collected, whether in the gene banks, whether at Svalbard, or whether it's seeds that women in villages collect. How do we ensure that that community is collectively working together to help us combat the effects of climate change?
Thank you, Eliane. I'm really, really happy to have someone like you in our executive board, and looking forward to meet you sometime if COVID ever permits.
Absolutely. Good.
We're nearly out of time. And to close, if you could all please sum up in one short closing statement why conserving and using seeds is so important, especially at this moment in time. We'll start with Kent, then we go with Eliane, and we close with Daniel. Kent, please.
Thank you so much, Nora. In short, it is an existential issue, a matter of survival of humanity. That is what we're talking about. So the whole thing is based on that, the first, to feed the growing population, and also to live in a life worth living, as Eliane had said. They're not just filling our stomachs, but also have livelihood and better nutrition. So essentially, that is why I think this is extremely critical, and why the support that Norway is providing to this project is, is very, very commendable.
Thank you, Kent. Eliane?
So for me, as a mother, as a female scientist, I think it's really critical to how do we care for ourselves and for future generations. And so for me, BOLD is a critical pathway to caring for future generations and doing all we can to ensuring that all children will have nutritious food no matter what.
Thanks, Eliane. Daniel? You're muted, Daniel, sorry.
Sorry about that. Good words basically for all, and I agree with all what has been said. I think the one thing for us, and which I look at it, and just sort of to add to it, is the seeds which we collect is actually within the seeds, there are the solutions for the problems which we're going to be having in the future, and it's only the seeds which we have today, which are the solutions for tomorrow. And that's what we have to work with. So biodiversity again and again and again is actually the main goal here. I feel that with biodiversity, we can help adjust and adapt to the program, to the situation of a climate change. And biodiversity. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kent, Eliane, and Daniel, for such an interesting and insightful conversation. It was great to have the time to share and to get to know some of your experience with this topic. I'm inspired to hear about the positive impact that long-term projects like this one can have, and all the importance of gene banks and the role in ensuring food security for all of us. And I also hope that the viewers of this conversation can also be inspired by your words. It truly does start with a seed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello to all of you at the Global Landscapes Forum, and thank you for letting me join you from Spitsbergen, home of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. My name is Åsmund Asdal, and I'm working here as Seed Vault Coordinator. As I record this, my Norwegian colleagues and I are busy managing the third and final seed deposit of this year. This week we welcomed seeds from 12 gene banks that are located all over the world. The world's crop diversity is at risk, and the Seed Vault is built to safeguard backup copies of these seeds needed for developing new plant varieties to feed a growing population in a changing climate. It's an example of forward-thinking leadership amid crisis, a long-term solution for a long-term need. It's an example of international cooperation where the importance of the more than 1 million seed samples that are stored here, this invaluable global common goods, take center stage. The Seed Vault is proof that we live in an interdependent world, no matter where we come from or what our religious or political beliefs are. All seed collections are welcome to be safeguarded here, from the smallest to the largest, from the most remote to the closest. Whether you know it yet or not, we all depend on this crop diversity to adapt our agriculture to new challenges, to feed ourselves and our children. It makes me very happy to see new diversity arrive here, and in doing that, to establish and develop a working relationship with more and more gene banks. And I hope that in the near future, the rooms inside this mountain will be filled up with more seeds. There are still so many seeds that need backing up. That's why Norwegian is proud to be working alongside with Global Crop Diversity Trust in its new BOLD project, fully funded by the Norwegian government, to, among much else, ensure greater cooperation and support for gene banks to back up their seeds here at the Seed Vault. And I'm grateful to speak to this ever-growing community at GLF Climate, and I can only hope the incredible international partnerships at the heart of crop diversity conservation inspires leaders to find common ground during COP26. Nothing is more important now. I wish you a productive and inspiring conference. All the best from a very cold Svalbard, close to the Arctic.
Thank you so much for joining us at GLF. Please continue to follow this journey and support crop diversity conservation and use at croptrust.org. Be well, be bold.